Hello Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords, and if you're new to the channel, welcome. We do all things dorkly here, so if it's superheroes, sci-fi, fantasy, we've probably got a playlist about it, so check it out. Today, no exception, we're talking about Lord of the Rings. Each week or so, I try to do a different topic on Lord of the Rings, just chat about it. And in fact, if you've got an idea, something just you've been dying to know about Lord of the Rings, feel free to make a comment, ask a question, and I would be happy to do a video about it in the future. This particular topic actually came to me last week when I was doing a little research on last week's topic, the Dead Marshes. I read this passage that was a little indirectly related to the Dead Marshes, and this passage just blew me away, and basically something I thought was true was not true. And so I thought, well, gotta do a video on that one. And so that topic is the Entwives. So who are the Entwives? Okay, well, if you remember in Two Towers, you've got Treebeard. Merry and Pippin meet Treebeard in Fangorn Forest. And while talking to Treebeard, one of the things he mentions is how he and the rest of the Ents lost the Entwives. And in the books, there's a long poem about the Entwives, and it's a lament. It's basically the Ents have lost their mates, and it's actually pretty sad. Like they went away, and where they went, no one knows. Especially the Ents. And they're very old creatures, so this is over thousands of years. Basically they have no way to propagate anymore. And so I always assumed that it was just a mystery that Tolkien left open-ended. Where did they go? Blink. They just, who knows? We could write your own ending to it. But no, there's actually, well, it's not like 100%. It's a pretty definitive answer to what happened to the Entwives. In fact, Tolkien wrote a letter about this very topic, and he said, I think this is what happened to the Entwives. And so here we go. All right, set the tone. First, back in the First Age, the Entwives and the Ents are living together. They're, I assume, hanging out in Fangorn Forest. Everything's hunky-dory. The Entwives, though, want to focus more on flowers and gardens and things that aren't just giant trees. So whereas the Ents themselves were, say, shepherds of the forest, the Entwives wanted to be more about the rest of the flora, not simply giant trees. So they moved away from Fangorn Forest in an effort to find a spot to cultivate, more or less. And they settled on an area, actually it just went right across the Anduin. Didn't go that far in terms of the map. I'll put a map up at some point here, but they ended up crossing the Anduin River and made this space. And in fact, they taught the locals that were there how to cultivate and garden. Those locals included the Northmen, which later became the Rohirrim. Check out my video on that as well, on the Rohirrim. Also, some of the hobbits that lived near the Anduin. I taught them gardening. Perhaps that leads into why they are such good farmers and gardeners in the Third Age. These people, in fact, came to honor the Entwives and revere them and put them into their mythology because of these skill sets, life-giving skill sets that they were given by the Entwives. And so all was well for a long time. Meanwhile, the Ents still haven't really gone to visit, let's say. Like, what's going on with the Entwives? Well, at some point, probably at the beginning of the Third Age. So an entire age goes by where the Ents don't really check in on the Entwives, who they think are just across the river. Third Age comes along, the Ents decide, hey, let's go visit the Entwives. Let's see what they're up to. And so, because they don't do anything quickly, slowly head over across the river to where they think the Entwives should be. Entwives, not there. It is now an area by the Third Age, and by the time, let's say, back to the War of the Ring, it's an area called the Brown Lands. For a good reason, because the area is just brown. All the vegetation that's there, which is not much, is brown. It's a desolate area. It's almost like a post-apocalyptic area. And not an Entwife to be seen. And so from the Ent standpoint, they must have just packed up and left. Where did they go? The Entwives. We've lost the Entwives. What happened with the Brown Lands actually is spelled out, and Tolkien was pretty specific at what happened here. And so this is it's kind of tragic, frankly, but this is where it kind of goes back to the Dead Marshes, because it involves the Battle of the Last Alliance. So then the War of the Last Alliance that ended the Second Age. If you remember from last week's video, I was talking about huge army was approaching, heading off to Mordor, and that was Gil-galad and the elves, with Elrond and Orifer and Amdir and those guys, along with Elendil and Isildur and the humans, and there were dwarves. I think there were a few dwarves as well, and there were kind of a little bit of everybody all massing to go and take on Sauron in Mordor. Sauron realizes, trouble afoot. He was sending out like packs of orcs to try to slow down their advance. And one of the other things he did to try to slow their advance was around the Anduin River. He knew they were going to be trying to cross the river. He set fire to large swaths of land, including the Brown Lands, in an effort to slow down the army of the Alliance. And so you've got, essentially, he murdered the Entwives. He burned the whole area down, and as far as we know, no Entwives escaped. And so he killed all the flora living in that area. And he did it so well that 3,000 years later, there's still nothing growing in that area. That says to me that perhaps he did it through magical means. He has the ring at that point. Perhaps he used the destructive power of the ring to either maybe cause a magical fire, or perhaps by killing off the Entwives in such a way that their power, by having it, be destroyed in that spot, made it some kind of, tainted it in some way that nothing could grow there, kind of the opposite of what an Entwife would do to that land, to the soil. But it is... it's total, it's desolate, and thousands of years later, there's still nothing growing in that area. And in fact, when the Fellowship of the Ring, at that point, the Fellowship of the Ring passes past the Brown Lands when they're paddling on their canoes down the Anduin. Like, oh, look at this area. It's off, so it's to the east of the Anduin River, kind of, on the way if you were to go to Mordor. And Aragorn sees it and notes how desolate the area is. And he wonders if it's, it doesn't look natural. He's like, this doesn't seem natural at all. Like maybe this is some evil trick of the enemy. Which it was, except he's talking about something from 3,000 years ago. So it's interesting that even Aragorn, member of the Dunedain, ranger, Númenorian, connected king of Gondor, doesn't know that history. And so it's something that, I guess people just didn't talk about, or that bit of information got lost through time. But and then Tolkien wrote this letter where he's like, I think Sauron destroyed the Entwives. So they are not there to be found anymore. I'd kind of hoped they'd maybe gone off to the west or something. But apparently they were killed off. There is one perhaps glimmer of hope for the Entwives, and that is there's a relative of Samwise, I think his name is Halfast Gamgee, talks about seeing a large elm-shaped tree creature walking across the North Moors at some point near the Shire. Now he didn't we're going to say that's an Ent, probably, unless it's a Hjorn. We'll do a video on the Hjorns at some point as well. But let's say it was an Ent of some type. Now, whether that's a male or female Ent, there's no answer to that. But the fact that there was an Entish creature that far away from Fangorn Forest might mean that perhaps there were some Entwives that escaped in some way, and they're now, maybe there was some in the Old Forest, which is very near the Shire. Anyway, if they survived, not many of them survived, and it's a sad tale. But yeah, when Treebeard laments that he lost the Entwives, it might even make him sadder if he knew the actual story, or maybe angrier. It might have made him want to take up arms even more against Sauron and Saruman, although obviously they did a good job against Saruman's forces. But there you have it. The fate of the Entwives. I thought that was a deliberately unanswered storyline. But in true Tolkien form, Tolkien knows the answers. And so he actually wrote down what he thought was the fate of the Entwives, unfortunate as it is. So there you have it, everybody. Thanks so much. Subscribe if you want to get more Lord of the Rings. We're also going to be talking about, I think, Daredevil Season 3 in the near future. We're talking about the Netflix show Maniac, very odd, eclectic, cool sci-fi show happening as well. So, yeah, feel free. We'll be back. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.